All right, as I said, 9:05, I'll start. We are still waiting for a few more people to join, but there is a recording, so anyone who's a little bit late will be able to access the beginning of this session. Welcome everyone to the Business Accelerator. It's so great to see so many of you on the call today. We've had over 200 applications to this program, and so well done for making it through to this round of the capacity building. My name is Courtney Barnes and I'm a manager on this program. I work for a company called B&M Analysts. We are a management consulting firm that specializes in manufacturing and value chain development. And we're the facilitators of the various industry clusters, which is probably how you came to hear about this program. We have a variety of SMEs on this call today, from the automotive sector to chemicals, clothing and textiles, and furniture, from KZN, Cape Town, the Eastern Cape, and even a bit further afield in Gauteng. And so just to note who these clusters are, you're receiving these emails. We have the Durban Automotive Cluster, the Eastern Cape Automotive Industry Forum, the Durban Chemical Cluster, the KZN Clothing and Textiles Cluster, the Cape Clothing and Textiles Cluster, as well as the eThekwini Furniture Cluster. And so who you'll be receiving emails from and the engagements that you'll be having going forward will be with those clusters. If you're in the automotive sector, you will be obviously working either with the Durban Automotive Cluster or the Eastern Cape Automotive Industry Forum. And the same goes for chemicals, clothing and textiles, depending if you are in KZN or Cape Town, and then the eThekwini Furniture Cluster. If you're in the furniture sector, that is the cluster that you'll be engaging with throughout this program. As I said, we've had over 200 applicants, so we're really excited to welcome you, the shortlist, to this program. We have a 3-hour session today, so quite long. Don't worry, there will be a break at about 10:45 for you to go stretch your legs, have a cup of coffee, and then join us at 11 because we have a really exciting industry panel after then. So why are we here today? One, to celebrate you for making it through this round. Second, to orientate you to the program. This is a new type of SME business accelerator. And so it's really important that we understand the framework and introduce the program to you going forward. The second is to equip you, to make sure that you have the knowledge and tools to develop a good business strategy and business pitch that you can take into the Dragon's Den. And I'll get more into detail about what that Dragon's Den is and what the opportunity for procurement and investment could be in that event. And then third, to motivate you. This is a really exciting program which we have run over the last 3 years in clothing and textiles, as well as chemicals. We know that real procurement and investment opportunity can happen through this program. We've seen over 2 million Rand in investments in chemicals and the creation of over 200 jobs through procurement in clothing and textiles. So there is a real opportunity that this program can bring to you and your business, but it doesn't happen without your participation and your commitment. And so by laying out the program to you today, I hope it motivates you to take this next step and to commit yourself to the program generally, but also to this Dragon's Den specifically, which is happening in the next few weeks. Today, we're all together, and as I said, there's a variety of SMEs on the call. We're here together because the conversation today doesn't matter what sector you're in. The skills and the discussion around business pitch and strategy are applicable to any sector. But as I said, going forward, you'll be meeting with your sectors. So we're all together today. We'll wish each other luck, and then we'll go forth into our various clusters that are more sector specific. Again, to note, there is an opportunity for Q&A and comments throughout, so please use the chat function or the Q&A function to raise your questions. And I'll definitely stop and make sure that your question is raised with either by myself, a member of our team, or with our panelists or presenters. So as I said, it's a 3-hour session today, but there will definitely be a break. We're going to spend the next 20 minutes orientating you to the program, explaining what it is, what is expected of you, and what the opportunity is within this Dragon's Den. From there, we'll go into a short lecture and introduction to developing an effective manufacturing strategy in an age of major change. So looking at how you actually build a strategy given the various elements in your sectors, the changing trends in manufacturing in South Africa and globally. And that's being led by Professor Justin Barnes, who's the Executive Director of the Toyota Wessels Institute for Manufacturing Studies, TWIMS. They're a specialist graduate institute based out of KZN that's really focused on manufacturing in partnership with Gibbs, the #1 MBA institute in South Africa. So we're in good hands to understand how to build a strategy in South Africa when you are a manufacturer. From there, we'll take a break. As I said, you go off 15 minutes to get a cup of coffee and stretch your legs. But then please do come back, because at 11 o'clock, we have a really exciting panel discussion with industry. 3 individuals who have a lot of experience, either investing or procuring from SMEs. Anton Peters, who has spent over a quarter of a century in retail, particularly at Woolworths, but really great career to share his experience working with and sourcing from SMEs. He's now working with SMEs quite directly as well in his, semi-retirement. So a wealth of knowledge there. Looking forward to hearing his views in the panel discussion. And then we have 2 trailblazers really in the accelerator space, Daniel Sochen and Trevor Ions. Daniel is the managing director of Ferro Coating Resins and Ferro Dispersions, a Bud Group company. And Trevor Ions is the managing director of NCS Resins, also a member of the Bud Group, a very large multinational group of companies. And Daniel and Trevor were part of the first accelerator in the Durban Chemicals Cluster. So they have years of experience in this sort of program, investing in SMEs. And I think, again, a wealth of experience there to bring in terms of, the pitches that they've seen in the past, what makes a good pitch, what makes them want to invest in SMEs. So again, although they're experienced in chemicals, the lessons can be drawn out to any sector. We'll wrap that up about 11:45, and we'll spend the last 15 minutes discussing the next steps and then closing out. As I said, there's opportunity for Q&A throughout. So please, if you do have any questions or comments, use the chat or Q&A function. So before I get into what this framework is, I think it's worth looking at what this Dragon's Den is, which is really the pinnacle of the program. The opportunity for you to present your business to dragons, to either have them procure from you or invest in you. So I'm going to show you a video now. There should be sound. Robin, please let me know if the sound isn't clear, to give you a bit of a taste of what this Dragon's Den is, and hopefully get you a bit pumped as well for the next few weeks.
It's the opportunity to network, it's the opportunity to just be able to present my business and be able to be up for alone.
It was nice to meet entrepreneurs from all over the country and just experience the diversity that we have in South Africa.
The Business Accelerator is targeted at developing small companies, SMEs, even companies from ideation phases to become potential suppliers to any of the Durban Chemical Cluster member companies.
It's been a great experience meeting people who are in industry and what they look for as investors, what they actually need from the industry perspective and what we could supply as entrepreneurs.
It's a municipality, the chemicals industry gave us a platform to express ourselves.
Big thank you to the Durban Chemical Cluster. It's been an amazing journey for us. During the lockdown, the Durban Chemical Cluster did a whole lot of workshops and engagement sessions pretty much every week. They kept us sane and kept us alive and kept us focused. And then, as I say, coming full key round to then re-engaging with Ferro and NCS Resins and the Bud Group and being able to actually get it across the line and receive the check. It's absolutely awesome.
Okay, so hopefully you're all feeling a little bit pumped. That is a fantastic soundtrack. But I wanted to show it to you because it really highlights what this Dragon's Den is all about. It's an opportunity for you to present your business, put your best foot forward, put on your best dress or suit and tie, and take your business to industry. And show them why you deserve to be invested in or bought from. And that's what makes this program really different to other programs. For some of you, you may have been in other SME programs, and there, as a note, there is a key difference here. Often a SME accelerator program will spend a lot of time upfront building capabilities, building your business communication skills, developing your technical capabilities, and then you graduate out of the program and we wish you the best and you go forward. But without an opportunity of either investment or procurement, you've developed these skills, but for what? You need to have sufficient cash flow. You need to be running your lines through with orders. You need a full order book. And so the support and then the graduation out without that business opportunity has often set up SMEs to fail. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to flip that around. The aim here is to develop high potential SMEs. So you are high potential SMEs as strategic suppliers to industry lead enterprises. Firstly, through market access. So we do a little bit of upgrading. That's the event today, as well as the pitch inspiration support session that will happen just before the Dragon's Den. So we have about a day and a half of support to make sure you're ready to present your business strategy to the Dragons. But then it's about market access. It's about quickly trying to link you to the Dragons for them to understand what your potential is and where you are in terms of market standards. And then from there, it's about supporting you in terms of meeting the standards. So we understand what the market wants from you, what your customer is looking for. And then from there, we build a program of support that can bring you up to that level or support you in maybe you've met the level, but you need to take on more demand than you had planned, so to help you grow. And there's potential for capital investment to support there as well. So we don't just upgrade and let you go. It's about market access first, and then upgrading you to meet what the market is asking you from you. And so just to take you through the steps of this program, we have spent a lot of time engaging with these lead firms, and I'll take you through who the lead firms are, but you would have seen them on the application marketing material that you and flyers, etc. So lead firms are inspired to participate in the program. They've confirmed what they're looking for, and we use those requirements to market and screen to you. So there's a reason you're here. It's because there's something about your business which we know lead firms are looking for, whether that be your strategic capability, your location. There's something there that the market is interested in. We then, and this is the stage we're in now, doing some due diligence, making sure that the financial numbers or capacity or compliance numbers that you've shared are correct. Really important going into the Dragon's Den that those numbers are correct, because those are the sort of numbers that lead firms are going to be asking from you. So we're making sure that those numbers are correct. We'll support you in being able to present those clearly to industry. And then support the development of your pitches, making sure that your 5 minutes on stage are the best possible 5 minutes in order to pitch your business for investment or procurement. So today is part of that. But as I said, there's also a day before the Dragon's Den where we're bringing in communication specialists, industry specialists to support you in building your pitches to the dragons. From there, we have the Dragon's Den. So the video I shared is a good example of what that could look like. It's a really awesome event, which gives you an opportunity to connect with lead firms, to present your business, and to celebrate the journey that you've been on. The Dragon's Den will happen over the next few weeks. Those dates have been shared with you, but we will share them again. They will happen between mid-November and the first week of December, depending on your sector. So if you're selected by a dragon in the Dragon's Den, we then move on to the business case. And this is to analyze the costing model or the investment model and identify improvement opportunities. So in the Dragon's Den, the lead firm tells you what they're looking for. They say, we see opportunity in you. You need to be able to do A, B, and C. And then the business case, we go and investigate with you and with, again, industry mentors to make sure that the numbers align and to plan the way forward to help you reach that level that the lead firm has shared that they need you to get to. From there, it's about this letter of intent. So when securing procurement or an investment, there is a spectrum on which a lead firm can commit to you as an SME. On the one spectrum, they can give you a thumbs up and say, oh, we really like you, and then this is an opportunity that we would like to pursue. And on the other hand, probably something that's far more secure is a contract. So a contract that says, we will buy from you at this price, and these are the delivery requirements. But that's very hard for a lead firm to do when they haven't worked with you before, when you maybe still need to make a few improvements to your business. And so the letter of intent sits somewhere in between those two poles. It is a document that is not legally binding, but it is a document that very clearly confirms what the lead firm's requirements are to unlock your commercial opportunity. So let's say you're a clothing manufacturer, your lead firm says, we would like to place 5,000 woven dresses with you at this price, at a minute rate of R2.50. If you can bring your compliance level up to 75% bargaining council compliance. That information is put in the letter of intent. It very clearly guides what the lead firm, what the opportunity is if you're able to meet certain standards. And so it documents the opportunity and it documents the requirements. And then it's signed by the lead firm and by yourself. And we use that letter of intent to then support all the upgrading. So the upgrading is very focused to make sure that you can meet the requirements of the lead firm to support you in meeting what that letter of intent says. This upgrading phase will happen in Q1 of next year and Q2, so from January to June of next year. And then we close out. And this is where we report the upgrading and procurement. We celebrate you, and hopefully you can take that letter of intent into a real commercial, into beyond a test order, into a continued relationship with your firm. And so that is the full program. As I said, we're currently here prepping ourselves for the Dragon's Den. This is happening on this side of the year. the business case, the letter of intent, the upgrading, and the closeout will all happen next year. So should you be selected in the Dragon's Den, you're really on a journey through this program. A lot of support, a lot of focus to ensure that you can meet the standards, to meet the opportunity that the Dragon's Den, the Dragon has selected you for. So who are the Dragons? Again, depending on your sector, the Dragons are different. For furniture, it's Mr. Price Home, Homewood, and At Home. As the members of the Dragons, that's who you will be pitching your business for procurement or investment from. If you're based in the Cape and you're a clothing and textiles firm, then you have 4 Dragons: Cape Union Mart, Pepkor, Woolworths, and Pep Clothing, one of the largest manufacturers in Cape Town. If you're in KZN, but in the clothing and textiles cluster, your Dragons are the Fashini Group, Pepkor, Mr. Price, as well as Woolworths. Chemicals, Bud Group, NCS Resins, as well as ferro-coating resins and ferro-dispersions. Sapref, as well as H&R. And then for the automotive sector, Lumotech, Hesto Harnesses, and Goodyear. So, I said, a really great opportunity to presenting your business to some of the leaders in industry within South Africa. So what do you need to take into the Dragon's Den? 1, a defined business strategy, an understanding of your unique selling proposition, an understanding of your capacity, capabilities, compliance, and competitiveness standards. So again, if you are in chemicals, good to understand and to note if you have any ISO accreditations, or if you're on a pathway to compliance from a health and safety perspective. Competitiveness, what is the price of your product or service? Your capacity, how many units can you produce in a day, a week, a month? Or how much can you service over a particular period of time? And what are your capabilities? And you'll see from the application form, we've already started asking many of these questions. So if you were a clothing and textiles firm, we asked you questions on the fabric you could use, on the products you could make. In the automotive or chemical space, we asked you questions around your ISO certifications, and a bit more questions around your capabilities. And then finally, and this is really important because without this skill, it's very hard to communicate the first 3. You need to be able to bring some presentation skills and hopefully a bit of energy and excitement to your pitch. And often we see this is where SMEs struggle. You have a business strategy, you know your business in terms of your unique selling position, and you understand your standards, but it's being able to present them. We've also seen actually the flip side where fantastic presentation skills, but not being able to fully communicate the capacity, capabilities, compliance, and competitiveness standards of your business, which makes it really hard for the lead firm, because what they're looking for is to understand these things too. And if you can't communicate them correctly, or you don't have these in place, it's very hard for a lead firm to invest or buy from you. And so today's event and the in-person pitch support day aims to support you in developing all of the above. Today, we're really focused on business strategy, as well as understanding your unique selling proposition from the presentation today from TWIMS, as well as from our industry panel discussion at 11. And then we have a full day for presentation skills. So the day before the Dragon's Den, helping you really hone your pitch skills and ensuring that you can confidently communicate these 3 elements for procurement or investment from the Dragons. So as I said, these are the key ingredients that you need to be bringing into the Dragon's Den. And today's event and the events to come are to really build your capacity, your capabilities in these 4 areas. But as I said, the focus for the next hour or so is really on defining a business strategy. And that's why I'm really excited to introduce Professor Justin Barnes to this webinar. Just to see if videos are on or sound is on. Okay, there we go. And I'm going to hand over to him to introduce himself and then to take us through a business strategy in times of disruptive change. Professor, over to you.
Thanks, Courtney. Good morning, everybody. Could I stop your screen sharing and then take over from my side?
Go ahead.
Thank you. My screen. Okay, I'm sharing. Great. Can everybody see my?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so what I'm going to be doing in my session is essentially talking to the challenges of developing an effective manufacturing strategy in an age of major change. And what I'm going to try and do is essentially outline the importance of identifying spaces where one can create value. How do you create a point of difference? How do you essentially ensure that you have a position to offer a marketplace something that is distinctive, something that adds value to that market, and something that's difficult to copy, something that gives you an edge over competitive rivals. I'm going to talk to some slides from some course material that we teach at the Toyota Vessels Institute for Manufacturing Studies. It's an institute that I'm responsible for, based in Kloof in KwaZulu-Natal. And we're trying to understand some of the key drivers of competitiveness in the manufacturing landscape. And of course, one of the key elements that we're trying to understand is effective strategy development in the manufacturing space, particularly given the digital disruptions that are reframing the competitiveness landscape. So what I'm going to be doing in my presentation is just briefly contextualizing the strategy challenge for manufacturers. I'm then going to talk to the strategy phases, and I prepared a few slides. I'll go through them quite quickly. I don't want to make this into a lecture, but I just wanted to give a frame to the challenges around strategy. And the elements that I'm going to look at are around the searching phase of strategy, the selecting phase of strategy, so deciding what you're actually going to be doing, and then the deployment phase. I'll say the least about deployment because that's obviously very operational, but we have to be very clear in the strategy process as to what areas we're going to add value in, and then clearly build an operational frame to deliver on that strategy. So I'll say a few things about it, but I won't go into much detail. And then I'm going to talk to the PDCA cycle. For those of you who are advocates of lean production, I'm not going to follow the cycle in exactly the same way, although I am borrowing the term, and I'll talk to the importance of essentially planning, doing, and then actually following through on the application and learning from the process in that particular cycle. So if I start off by contextualizing the strategy challenge, this is something we at TWIMS we call the TWIMS house, and it highlights the challenge facing all manufacturers, whether they're in South Africa or anywhere. It makes no difference. There is a challenge around leadership, and that of course ties in with the vision for the future. What is an organization's true north? What is an organization's reason for being? And that is embodied within the leaders of that organization. How are they planning for the future? How do they envision that future? Because of course, then they'll make resources available for the future that they're visioning. So leadership is critical. How do you lead with authenticity? How do you lead with a clear sense of the future? But also, how do you keep your shoulder to the millstone in relation to the short-term issues you have to grapple with? So leadership's important, and you need to make sure you've got the right leadership team in place. But then there are three strategic pillars. Two of them are challenges that all manufacturers face. The one is, how do we grapple with all of these digital disruptions that are coming? We know that the wide range of digital disruptions, whether it be industrial Internet of Things or the Internet of Things, if it's machine learning, if it's additive manufacturing, if it's in relation to new materials being used. We know that these have got to be absorbed into organizational strategies. And we know that that links to the challenges around carbon neutrality. So we know that the future is going to be one where manufacturing is going to have to prove that it has zero impact on the environment. And that obviously ties in with circularity, how one deals with the end life of products, but it critically also relates to the amount of carbon used in the production phase, how much carbon is generated in the use phase of the product. And we're seeing some very big developments, such as the introduction of the EU carbon border tax. We're seeing the requirement for circularity, so the recyclability of products in particular markets, such as the end-of-life vehicle legislation we see in the European Union as well, which is essentially going to force the greening of manufacturing. The clothing industry is going to go through exactly the same thing. And I think we can imagine in the future, especially some of the cheaper polyesters we're using are unlikely to be accepted in certain markets in the future. Then, of course, the specific that we have in relation to our position here in South Africa is, how do we fit into the subcontinent? And how do we fit into the broader continent? We are sitting in essentially the last place on earth that has still got to initiate the industrialization process. All of the other regions of the world have either well-established productive capabilities or are on a fast track towards developing them. So we're talking about developing Asia. Africa doesn't have that. As a matter of fact, the limited industrialization that has taken place in Africa seems to be quite stuck at the moment. So how do we build a set of regional capabilities? And I would argue that the lead firms in South African value chains are all struggling with these issues. How do they expand into our neighboring countries? But at the same time, how do they create jobs in those countries? Should they have some distributed manufacturing? So should they be making some of their products in those economies? And I would argue that South African manufacturers, you can solve that problem for the lead firms, for the big retailers, for the traders in those environments. Those manufacturers are going to secure competitive advantage. So we need to think through what African trade and industrialization looks like. We've got this African Continental Free Trade Agreement. There's a whole range of developments in Africa that present major opportunities for the creation of new value. How do we do that? And then, of course, we have the lean elements. These are critical. How does one operate organizations with limited waste, whether that be in the operational space or whether it's in the supply chain space? And then, fundamentally, there are always key general management skills, which one needs to grapple with. Marketing, sales, any other functional areas, supply chain management, ops, accounting, etc. So these general management skills are critical, and they form part of this framework. Any organization that is looking at its strategic position now and its strategic position in the future needs to position itself in relation to this house. What leadership will it need? What technologies will it be using? How does it position itself in respect to this green revolution we're going through? What type of value does it create for Africa? How do the operations ensure minimum waste so that the organization is as competitive as possible? And what are the key functional skills that need to be in place in order to deliver on the value that the organization is responsible for? Okay, so that's the house. This is obviously the big disruption that I've already referenced, which is the major shift we're going through at the moment, where we're seeing the connection of physical product to digital systems. And this digitization that is taking place is essentially the placement of sensors on things and essentially making products smart. When you put sensors on things and you can monitor and create new use functions for those items that have been manufactured, they connect the sensors to clouds. Those clouds allow for new types of value to be created, and there's new types of business models. So that's what we call digitalization. So all manufacturing is going to be nested within digital platforms of some kind. And the nesting between the physical and the digital is going to create new forms of value. So strategy cannot be agnostic of technology. because of the major change in the technology base of value chains that we are presently positioned in, which is what's really important, that all strategy considers the drive towards digitalization in that space, and then how that digitalization results in new forms of digital business models. Now, mop is a mop, get that, but there is going to be fundamental change across the board. And I'm going to use the example of clothing and textiles in a few slides' time to explore how this is going to potentially fundamentally change the nature of how manufacturers operate. So the real challenge when we look at strategy is how we think about innovation, because strategy is not simply about a firm developing itself in a particular way in order to advance itself. It forms part of how a firm thinks of innovating in a space. It's part of how a firm learns, understands the environment in which it operates, and then builds capability to take advantage of the opportunities and mitigate the threats of the changes in its operating environment. So this set of concentric circles and then that sideways triangle talks to a summary of the challenge of strategy. And for those of you who've done strategy before, you'll know that, you know, once a year or whatever it is, typically managers go off and they decide to do a strategy session. And they'll start thinking about the customer, start thinking about disruption, they'll use a framework, and they'll search. From that searching, they'll then select. So they'll search to try and understand what all the disruptions are, where the opportunities are, where the threats are. And then out of that mix of the threats and the opportunities, they will select what areas they're going to concentrate on. And once they've agreed upon the things they're going to focus on, they then come up with a deployment plan. And that deployment plan is then focused on the use of the company's resources to go and give effect to the changes that have been agreed upon through the strategy process. Now, the reason why we place this within the concentric circles is because the sort of leading thinkers on strategy and innovation highlight how ineffective that strategy process typically is. And the argument is that it's typically ineffectual because the strategy process is delinked from a learning process. And that actually what organizations need to be doing is they need to be learning. They need to create the space to be generate an understanding of where the business model that they presently operate in is going, what the disruptions are in the broader operating environment, where the new opportunities are in that broader environment. And by engaging on the learning process, making sure that they're on top of what's happening, they are then able to draw the linkages between that learning process and the development of an innovation strategy. An innovation strategy is critical to having an innovative organization. So having resources that are thinking about the future of the business, making sure there's space in the business to be able to think about the future. And that is when the search function thrives, because that pyramid highlights the challenge of the search function. You have a little bit of time to try and understand a very broad set of issues. Once you've understood the broad set of issues, you narrow them down into a funnel, and then you've got to select from the issues that you've engaged with. You've either determined that you're going to ignore them, or you're going to think about them later, or you're going to do something about them now. And if you've chosen to do something about them now, you've then got to prioritize them in some way or form to decide which of the key elements are going to be focused on with whatever resources you have. And then once you've decided on how you're going to be doing that and you've allocated the resources, you're then in a position to come up with a deep deployment plan to give effect to the strategy that you've framed. So this is how it frames strategy. Now, what I'm saying sounds quite academic, and I'm obviously giving you a very high-level overview. If you haven't done these things, it's not a big deal, because, of course, we always start from where we are. And I love this quote from Martin Luther King. He said, if you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, you have to keep moving forward. So the key question is not whether you've completed the cycle. It's recognizing whether you're doing the cycle effectively and then making progressive steps towards doing it more effectively. And if you're starting from a zero base, that's absolutely fine, then crawl. If you're already crawling, then walk. If you're already walking, then run. If you're already running, well, then you can work out how to grapple with this at a much broader level and actually fly. And of course, every organization sits in a value chain. It sits in a position where it's able to extract value determined by where it's positioned. So this is a breakdown of the cost of a coffee. Let's make this a Nescafe instant coffee at a local supermarket. When you spend 100 Rand on that, 22 Rand goes to the retailer, 29 Rand to the roaster, 8 Rand to the global buyer, 2 Rand to the insurance freight service provider, 8 Rand to the export agent, 21 Rand to the X-farm processing, so the selecting, the drying, and the preparation of the coffee beans, and 10 Rand goes to the farmer. So if you were strategizing, depending on who you were in that value chain, where you could find new opportunities for value, where are the adjacencies? Where are the opportunities? As a farmer, should you be doing more X-farm processing? Could that allow you to actually grow your business? If you're an X-farm processor, should you not be investing in the ability to directly connect to the marketplace and take out the export agents, take out the global buyers? There's 16 Rand and that 100 Rand that sits somewhere else. So where you position is not the materially important issue. What is important is recognizing where you are positioned and then where the associated opportunities are for growth. Because the challenge for any organization in the manufacturing value chain is to move into areas where there's more scope to generate value. And the challenge in a modern manufacturing value chain is that your lowest level of value addition. So if you can see my arrow moving around on the screen, you'll see the lowest level of value presently. So if you look at this, it's called the smiling curve of value add. The lowest level of value addition is in assembly. And then as you go into actually manufacturing components and doing R&D, or you move into sales and after-sales service, you're able to capture higher levels of value. And what we've seen over the last half century is that the assembly processes give you increasingly low levels of return, and associated activities give you higher levels of return. So where are you positioned? Where are the opportunities, and how do you take advantage of them? And I've just included this slide as a bit of a diversion, but it's a nice takeaway. You know, we always think of an Apple iPhone as made in China. It says so on the box. Well, a $600 iPhone 4 only had $6.54. So only 1% of its value actually lay in China. All of the value lay somewhere else. So where are those opportunities in value chains? Often the opportunities lie in areas that are not immediately obvious. How do you create value for the customer? In this case, although China does a lot of assembly, it certainly doesn't create a huge amount of value for Apple. It's a very small part of the $600. And this brings me back to the innovation space. So wherever you are, you're starting from your particular position. How do you navigate the complexities of the environment in which you're in? And I would argue that before you do a serious strategy process, you first have to think about the innovation space within which your firm is located. And this is a really nice framework from a set of academics working in the innovation space. And they've got this 4P framework: product, process, position, and paradigm. And you need to think of this framework in relation to doing better and doing different. So if you're near the middle of this circle that I've squished, this circle essentially talks to incremental changes you need to make in your product, incremental changes you need to make in your process, your position, or your paradigm, to fundamentally different things being done. And if we think about what's happening in whatever value chain you're located, what's changing in the product space, what's changing in the process space, what's changing in the position space, as per my coffee value chain, what's changing in the paradigm space? Is the market evolving in a way where people are no longer buying things but renting things, where they're no longer using one type of service but choosing to spend their money on another type of service, and changing the paradigm of how the market operates? And so we need to understand if there is minor change opportunity or whether there's going to be major disruptive change across this 4P framework. And I want to give an example of the clothing, textiles, footwear, leather value chain that feeds into retail. So if we think about the 4P framework in relation to product, the do better would be using biomaterials. So you've got firms that now make materials that are fully compostable, right? So we can wear the shirts, it's made of cotton, but the cotton's got enzymes in it, and when it's finished, you put it into a compost heap, and 6 months later, you no longer have a shirt. The shirt is now fully dissolved into the soil, and it's got sort of really positive consequences for the environment. That's doing things better. You're still making a garment, you're still sewing the thing together, you're still weaving it or knitting it, you're still dyeing it and finishing it, you're still spinning the yarn. However, you're using a different material that results in a different product outcome. And therefore, there may need to be innovations around what types of chemicals you use, what types of conversion technologies are impacted. It's a do better. If you've got electronic wearables like that lady in the picture, it changes fundamentally. So if you're using nanotechnology, carbon nanotubes, etc., and you've got the ability to recolor or to change the logo on a t-shirt, you've now potentially got a very different conversion for it. The product's fundamentally different. It's made of an entirely different construction. It may be used by the customer in an entirely different way. And so therefore, it's a major disruption to how you would be organized. If we think of process technology, the graphic up there is Zara. That's Zara's head office in La Coruña, Spain, and that is where they monitor point of sales data. So Zara is really interesting because, of course, Zara's got this 14 to 16 day lead time where they can go from idea to garment supply in a store anywhere in the world. And the way they do it is through these quick response processes tied to receiving essentially an attribute list on every item of product sold. And so they've got deep intelligence from point of sales terminals, which they then monitor to decide on what color, pattern, trim, silhouette, fabric construction is going to trend and how they need to respond to that. So if we think of process changes in the future, all retail is going to have an omni-channel framework, right? They're going to be supplying through stores, but also supplying online. If you're supplying online, is there going to be a change in the order fulfillment process? Do you deliver directly to the customer? How does it actually work? Those will be incremental changes to your processes. If you've got artificial intelligence-driven quick response like Zara has, where the AI algorithms calculate the best mix of pattern, fabric construction, price point by geography, then your processes are going to need to adapt very quickly to respond to that level of quick response. And of course, if you've got additive manufacturing, so you've got distributed manufacturing, potentially your process changes fundamentally. And I'm going to talk more about this when I get to the paradigm changes. When we talk about position, the graphic I've got up there is the Adidas footwear sole, which is made of recycled ocean plastics. And so position is really around brands and how one positions oneself in a marketplace in order to present one's credentials. Can you show that your product is healthier for the person using the product? Is it better for the environment? So can you earn green credentials through the process? But also, can you change your position in the market? So if you're a manufacturer and you're supplying to retail, why can't you create your own online selling presence? If you create an online selling presence, can you change the way in which you relate to the customer? So there are retailers, retailer manufacturers in the US where you co-design the garment with them. And they've got algorithms based on whoever's interested and essentially comes up with the coolest designs for example, placement prints. They will then make that placement print and they will give the person whose design was selected a margin on that product. They essentially co-create product through a crowdsourced research and development function. And they're able to do that because the manufacturing has now gone direct to market. The manufacturing is directly linked into the consumer base that buys those products. And that's a fundamental change in the position, right? So brands is a small change, making products that are healthier and perhaps having a blockchain technology to demonstrate to the market that the product is verified as being healthy for the environment, healthy for individuals and good for the environment. But when you start co-creating and you start creating new brand equity for yourself, so you're able to actually service a market with your own identity, you can capture a lot more value and you fundamentally change your position. And then, of course, the paradigm changed, the changes. So what happens if we didn't need retailers? What happens if everything was virtual? What happens if you could put in a VR headset, you could walk through a virtual mall, and you could choose amazing products, and then those amazing products were printed at your house using a 3D printer. Now, that's obviously very abstract and is far away, but that's what we call a paradigm change. When that happens, everything changes, because the nature of how we engage with the market fundamentally changes. So instead of buying, we rent. Now, that's a small paradigm change. The market changes. We no longer think of buying clothing. We can rent clothing, and you actually can in places like New York, where you can hire your wardrobe by the month. The other is to move towards circular reuse, where the product has to have multiple life cycles, and that may be forced by regulation. And then, of course, we've got clothing as code. What happens if code is the basis for transacting, and that you actually download code and you're able to print that on your own 3D printing at home? Now, this is done. If you go on YouTube, you'll find a whole range of speakers talking about the possibility of this and showing you garments they've printed at home and shoes they've printed at home. It's all possible. It's obviously incredibly expensive, and it's the garments and the shoes certainly wouldn't feel good on the skin. So they're not commercial, but it's thinking through the disruption. And this is why the innovation framework is so important. Because the challenge with strategy is that if you've not prepared your strategy to be innovation rich, your strategy can only be organic. Because if you haven't prepared your strategy, your search function is going to be massively limited. Because what are you going to search? You're going to search for things you already know. And if you only know a limited number of things, well, then your strategy can't extend beyond the things you know. So the 4P framework, I believe, is a really fantastic framework, because it should be the thing that organizations are thinking about in preparation for strategy. And I would argue for small firms trying to find a position for themselves in a value chain to add major value to a customer they're trying to connect to, they need to think about the position of themselves in relation to this innovation framework. Where can they add value to those lead firms? And of course, if you don't do it, somebody else is going to do it. So this is Schumpeter's innovation scheme, and what Schumpeter basically argues here very compellingly is that it's incumbent upon all firms undertaking strategy to find ways of increasing the types of returns they're going to get on their business. And the way to do that is to find innovation opportunities. And with each round of innovation, you're able to maintain your advantaged position. If you don't innovate, so you don't strategize effectively in that innovation space and find new ways of creating value, you're going to find your profit eroding back down to essentially a terminal point where you no longer make money, because somebody else will occupy your space, because they're going to innovate. They're going to be finding process opportunities, product opportunities, position opportunities, paradigm opportunities to displace you. So how do you position yourself in order to make sure that you are able to operate profitably in an environment with lots of competition? Okay, so I've been very broad. I've outlined these big issues. How do we bring this down now to strategy? And there's lots of strategy tools. There's literally hundreds of them for each of the 3 steps. I'm going to introduce a couple of them. For searching, you use the 5 forces model. You can use competitiveness profiling, the Boston box. For selection, you can use a process product matrix. You can use a risk assessment model, and you can frame that risk assessment model in a variety of forms. And then deploying, it's really around a value chain framework. Do you have the organogram? Do you have the resources in the right place? Do you have the right people in the right place to actually support the strategy? And then you need a decision matrix of some kind. I'm going to talk to each of these, but what I wanted to emphasize before I get to the breakdown of the different strategy tools, is the challenge between scope and resource. So organizations will always argue that they don't have the time to do strategy. They're too busy. But there's a contradiction in that, because if you don't do your strategy effectively, you're going to select the wrong things. And if you select the wrong things, you're going to put a huge amount of deployment resources into doing things that actually create no value. And because they don't create value, you're not going to have the time to create strategy, because you're going to be chasing your tail. And that's why these two sort of sideways triangles are positioned against one another, because there's a contradiction. The search needs to be broad and deep, but typically there aren't resources for it. And yet when we get to the deployment phase, where we're certain about how we're going to allocate resources, and then we put huge resources into the deployment, we often get it wrong because the search function was too narrow, and we end up putting resources into the wrong thing. And so the balance between strategy scope and the resource requirements needs to be kept in place. So if we look at the Porter's 5 forces, from a strategy search process, we're always trying to understand what's changing in the markets and the customers. We're trying to understand what is happening in the supply chain. We're trying to understand if there's a risk of substitutes. So if people are choosing to spend their money on alternative products in the marketplace, we're trying to understand whether there are new entrants that are potentially going to disrupt the market. And then we've got our established set of competitors who are all following the Trippeterian innovation scheme and trying to find new packages of value. So the question that has to be posed is, strategically, what changes are likely to impact organizations as a result of the global value chain disruptions? So if we think of these digital disruptions, now, so I work a lot in the automotive industry, there's a real challenge with vehicle autonomy, with the emergence of battery electric vehicles. We're seeing the development of mobility service platforms like Uber, challenging vehicle use and vehicle ownership in major developed markets around the world. So how are these challenges going to unfold, and where within the 5 forces are they likely to shape the business opportunities? If you look at your business and you look at the opportunities that have been scoped, what business opportunities open or close as a result of these disruptions? Are the stars going to remain the same? Are the cash cows going to remain the same? Or what about the dogs? Which is obviously the areas you want to exit. Do they still remain the dogs that you want to exit, or will that shift? And of course, here we have to understand the exit costs, because of course you've got established positions in markets, they give you a return, or they're no longer giving you a return. Do you keep investing in those, or do you exit and find other opportunities? The key from a new firm perspective, though, especially in relation to something like the Dragon's Den, where you're pitching for the new opportunities, where are the stars? And remember, it's not just the stars for you, it's the stars for your customer. Where are those opportunities? And that's why I like that 4P framework, right? Because it's about positioning your star in relation to the solution of the challenge or the realization of the opportunity that the customer's identified. If you're able to better position them in product, better position them in relation to process, or to support their positioning in the marketplace, or to help them respond to a paradigm change, then you've created the opportunity to leverage a new set of stars for yourself. And typically, these would be areas where you've got major growth potential and where there's a very large market. Those would represent your star opportunities. And then, of course, we get to the key performance indicators. How do the key performance indicators of future markets look? What will the market drivers be? If you're in the fashion game, speed is going to matter. Speed is going to matter more and more every year. If you can supply a garment to a retailer in a very short lead time, it allows them to read their point of sales data first before deciding what garments to put into store, which means that they're going to have much more accuracy and they'll sell more products at full price. So they will value flexibility more than potentially input margin. So how do the key performance indicators change? What is the balance between price, quality, fast delivery, delivery reliability, being able to provide in small batches, having innovative design, being able to make frequent product changes to adapt to changing market conditions? Where are these drivers? How are they going to change, and how do you position yourself in relation to them? And then, of course, those are the search elements, right? Those are the big questions you've got to ask, and you've got to be able to answer them in relation to What elements are out there that you need to consider bringing into your selection process for your strategy? And then you've got to start asking the questions before you select things to say, well, hold on a second. The fact that the market wants it, the fact that there's a development in the space doesn't mean that we can do it. There are certain things we can do on a product side, and there are certain things we can do on a process side. So this little framework that I put up here talks to a firm that can make car components, aircraft spares, and do engineering repairs. And in terms of the technologies deployed in the operation, it can grind, it can drill, it can cut, it can polish. Those are the process technologies. So anything that falls, a car component that requires grinding, drilling, cutting, and polishing, one would immediately say, hold on, that should be something, if we've identified as an opportunity, we should pursue, because we've already got the established capabilities in that area. We may not be able to adhere to the quality standards, so we must invest in that, but it's a low risk because we've already got established product and process capability in that space. If it's a new product using existing processes, so it's beyond this, now it's white goods, for example, well, it's medium risk because they still require grinding, drilling, cutting, and polishing. Or if it's the same product group, but there's new process technologies, for example, there now needs to be painting, for example, then you need to extend that technology, which may not be something that you're capable yet in, but you would need to invest in it. It's also medium risk because it fits with complementary capabilities. The high risk elements are the elements that fall outside of the current competencies. You don't have product experience and you don't have process experience in those areas. Those are high risk. It doesn't mean you shouldn't pursue them, because the 4P framework may show to you, and your strategy process, the 5 forces model, for example, may show that it's a major opportunity, but it is high risk. And because it's high risk, one would have to articulate a very careful strategy in relation to that realization of that risky opportunity. Then we get to the portfolio model. And the portfolio model very similarly puts technologies on the x-axis, and it puts a set of products and processes on the y-axis. And it talks to core, planned, and possible products and processes, and it talks to the technologies. Are they basic, proprietary? Are they pacing so that they're developing, or are they emerging? Emerging means these are technologies such as the digital elements that may be too far away, but you want to keep watching them. Pacing means they're going to get to you very shortly. You want to keep a close watch on them. Proprietary means that you've got to lock these down, because you're going to have to invest in research and development. They're not readily available in the market, and you're going to have to build up the internal capability. Basic means you can either plug and play, you can bring it in from somewhere else, or the patents or the technologies are so basic that there's universal use of them. Where are the opportunities for the organization to move forward? Because this is, once again, this is part of the selection process. If you know what your existing capabilities are, you know where you want to extend it, you still got to apply the portfolio model, because you want to see where the technology is going. And can you access those technologies or not? And then you want to risk profile these, because of course, out of these opportunities come the opportunity for projects. There come the opportunities to frame experiments, to frame the development of new revenue channels within a business. And you need to have a mechanism for identifying whether they're worth pursuing. So if it's high risk, it must be high return. Otherwise, it's not worth doing. So what are the benefits relative to the risks associated with the implementation? And that's really where the basket of selection gets narrowed down to, is any form of risk assessment model that you need to consider. And then it's really around the decision matrix. Does it fit with the strategy when you do the deployment plan? Does it fit with your competency base? How feasible is the implementation? How much money does it cost? What other resources are required in terms of key personnel use? What are the benefits? How do you score it before you select it? And this is the final selection process. And critically, it's got to be tied back to the quality of the search function and the selection filters that are applied. The final list of options needs to be tested through a decision matrix. The criteria can be altered, but key is an objective, inclusive scoring system. I always say, bring in a third party to look at your decision. The problem when we do projects is we fall in love with them. So if I think of all the big mistakes I've made, is because I've stopped seeing the wood for the trees. You go down a process, you're passionate about it, you're fully committed to it, and after you spend a lot of money, somebody asks you the obvious question, which you didn't see yourself, because you didn't apply decision matrix. You were so excited, you decided to look through some obvious flaws and focus only on the upside, and that invariably catches you out. That brings you to Porter's value chain model. You have to think through in the deployment phase, are you organized for the strategy? Do you actually have the support infrastructure in place in terms of digital infrastructure, in terms of physical infrastructure? Do you have the human resource management process? Do you have the technology development process? Or is your procurement organized appropriately? Are your primary activities organized properly? And then critically, how do you get buy-in? How do you make sure that when you reorganize the elements that need to be reorganized in the business to give effect to the strategy, that you've got support for that? Okay, and that brings me back to the PDCA cycle. And I wanted to borrow this because, I mean, this is from a lean process, right? So you do your A3s or your PDCA cycle. But strategy is really no different. It's got a longer time frame. But you plan to do something, then you have to go and do it. And then you want to check to see how it's being done. So you need a monitoring and evaluation framework to make sure that it's progressing in alignment with what you wanted to do. And then between the checking and the doing, you're adjusting, right? Because you're learning from the cycle. And so for me, strategy goes back to being part of the innovation cycle, because you're trying to use the strategy as the learning process to support the innovation cycle itself. Because you found things that you need to do in order to improve your position. You're doing them with the best of the knowledge that you have. Go back to Martin Luther King. You're crawling, now you're trying to walk, no problem. But in that walking, you're stubbing your toe. You're checking as to why you stubbed your toe, and if you could find ways of stopping doing it. And then you adjust what you're doing so you stop hurting yourself. And that allows you on the short cycle to make sure that your strategy is effectively implemented. Over that annual cycle, you can then go back to a bigger PDCA, because essentially that's what a strategy session is, to go back to replan your strategy and decide then, now that I'm comfortable walking, I'm now going to start running. So how do I do that? How do I check? And then how do I adjust as I develop my capabilities and advance my organization? The question is, what is the alternative? What if you don't do anything? And you say, well, all of this is nice to know, but it's very academic. And what we really need to be thinking about is just keeping things exactly as they are. Well, we all know how that ends as markets change and evolve and as competitors enter marketplaces. Eventually, the businesses erode and somebody eats the organization's cheese. Thanks very much.
Oh, I'm on mute. Thank you so much for sharing. If you wouldn't mind just sharing your presentation again, I've got a few questions, and there might also be some questions from the group. So I just encourage everyone on the call, if you have a question, to please put it in the chat or the Q&A function. So maybe just to ask quite a broad question, but I think, again, based on your experience, and feel free to pull from automotives. There are about 15 automotive firms on the call today. What mistakes have you seen firms make when developing a strategy? Is there a, you've noted some of the challenges, but is there like a common mistake that the group needs to look out for as they build the strategy?
Okay. The biggest mistake is firms are often not fit for strategy, because strategy is something that's done very mechanically on a cyclical basis. And so strategy then becomes purely organic. You will simply try and stretch the business a bit, try and make yourself a little bit more efficient. You'll try and extend your process capability or your product a bit further, but your glasses are quite narrowly set. It's a bit like being fit. You can't go to gym and be instantly fit. You've actually got to train to get fit. It's the same with strategy. For strategy to work effectively, and that's why that innovation framework is so important. It looks academic, but actually it fits in and resonates. It's why I use it. It resonates so strongly with my own experience, where you go and facilitate a strat session and the firm is locked into what it does. The team members have all been so busy firefighting. They've been so busy focused on creating the value that they presently create for the customer. They've been so busy dealing with supply chain issues, and especially with COVID. I mean, it's a crisis everybody's in, including myself at the moment. You deal with all of these issues, and so you get locked into your operational frame. And then, somebody puts into your diary that you're going to get in a 2-day or 3-day stretch session somewhere nice. You look forward to it, and you get there, but you're not fit for it because you're actually locked in with a very narrow set of blinkers. That's why I emphasize things like the 4P framework. And I'm not pushing 4P. There's other frameworks one can use. I like to use the 4P. But you want to break the mold of thinking. You want to think beyond the narrow confines of the bits you're dealing with in your business. And so what I find, people have a great discussion. You'll bring the 4P framework or another framework. There'll be an exploration. You'll use Porter's 5 forces. You'll use something to just get people to think. But when you ask them to select, they go back to what they're comfortable with. They go back to what they're comfortable with for a number of reasons. One is organizationally, they're structured to deliver operations only. They're not really structured to do strategy. And it's the bit they're comfortable with. It's the bit they fit doing. It's what they're trained to do. They've got processes for that, but they don't have on the strategy side. And I'm giving you a very general answer, but it's the thing that I see consistently when I work with organizations is that their strategies are too organic. It's always about an extension of the thing that they're doing, as opposed to challenging fundamentally why they're doing it and trying to think about value in a value chain, value in a marketplace. They're thinking about digital disruption, thinking about new materials development, thinking about entirely new processes, entirely new opportunities within value chains. And often that's limiting.
Just on that note as well, going back to the 4P framework. So as I said, there are a few different sectors on the call today, and I think you did a fantastic job of framing the clothing and textiles space and hopefully inspiring some of the firms on the call to see where they could fall into the 4Ps. If you took this framework and applied it to, let's say, the automotive space, what would you see as the product position, process, and paradigm?
So if it comes down to the firm, so it comes down to the individual firm, right? I'm using a general sort of value chain approach. But let's just say, for example, on the product side, what materials and what components are going to go into a battery electric vehicle? So we know it's going to be made of metal. Might be made of, or could be made of aluminium rather than steel. But we know that many things are going to remain unchanged because people are still going to be sitting in seats. The vehicle needs to be lighter because battery packs are heavy and the range is compromised by that. So the rest of the body needs to be as light as possible. But what changes fundamentally? Do you still have an exhaust system? No, you don't. So if you're an exhaust system manufacturer, what do you have to do differently? Of course, exhausts are about heat. So is there an opportunity? Are there other thermal issues on a battery electric vehicle that you can accommodate? Because the challenge with autos is you're going to go from ICE, internal combustion engine, to soft hybrid, to plug-in hybrid, to BEV. As you go into these hybrid technologies, you actually keep stacking additional value on top of the old technology. So actually, you still have the opportunity to sweat for at least another 10 years, maybe even 15. There's going to be huge opportunities still to sweat the old technology. The challenge is when BEV, so when battery electric replaces the hybrid, the entire ICE is removed. And when that gets removed, many of the things associated with the drivetrain technology and how power is distributed to the wheels changes fundamentally. So not just the engine, but the transmission, and then all of the associated sort of drivetrain elements change. Where's your firm position in relation to that? What are the material changes? What are the product changes? What does the value chain look like? Does the tier one firm, who's presently responsible for a system, does that tier one firm still hold that position? Or does the nature of the change mean that the relationship is going to be directly between the firm and the OEM? Or will there be a reconfiguration of the supply chain? Will there be another firm that you need to link into as a tier two? So there's going to be major product, and that then ties back with processes. We all know how the auto industry is structured, with the OEMs organizing themselves on a just-in-time basis. Will some of those processes change? What about additive manufacturing? Will there be a bigger role in additive manufacturing? If you're a firm making replacement parts, and often that's the entry into the auto industry, and you're making a crash part, you know, should you be having additive manufacturing in Windhoek or in Lusaka to supply the vehicles that are supplied into that aftermarket, but where the supply chains are long and the logistics costs are high? You know, is additive manufacturing an opportunity, especially when you have run-out models for older generation vehicles, and cost, the tooling up costs, etc., are high relative to the small volumes that are run? So how will the processes change? Similarly, in relation to position, can you directly engage with customers in the aftermarket? Could you provide replacement parts directly yourself through some form of I'm trying to think of the word now, brochure, not a brochure, but some form of point of sales presence where people can select off your product range for supply into the market, where you've then got a very sophisticated logistics system. Can that position you so you don't have to supply through the OEMs anymore under an original equipment supply relationship? You can potentially supply directly yourself. Is the market going to change fundamentally? Actually, in the automotive industry, the big change, I don't think actually relates to BEV, because there's still a person driving it. The bigger change affecting us is going to be the movement towards autonomous vehicles. And of course, we're already seeing disruptions in mobility because of the sort of widespread availability of these mobility service providers like Uber. But Uber's never competitive because it's got a driver in the car, and the driver costs money. The moment that car's autonomous, it changes the whole basis of mobility. And so, you know, what will then happen in the market space? It's good to know these and understand these things, but what you want to do is, remember, you're going from the plausible to the possible to the probable to I need to act now in your search process. So depending on where you are, whether you're making a bracket, or whether you injection molding a plastic component, or whether you're undertaking some sort of precision finishing process, you're wanting to understand where your product fits in that mix. And then you're wanting to understand how can you create more value. And it often is not dramatic. The problem with the 4P is we all get excited about the end bits, including myself, when I look at the 4 examples I gave. Often the real value in the short term lies in the do better. Can you find a way of bringing in a product that's fully biodegradable? Can you find a way of bringing in a product that costs the same as the imported product, but now creates some jobs? And gives the OEM an incentive, because of course there's the production incentive and there's the volume assembly localization allowance. There's a whole lot of reasons why they want to buy locally, as long as the standard is appropriate. So where are those opportunities? What I'm basically saying is that if you don't think about the do different, you often struggle to even think about the do better, because it's a gray area, there's a gradient. And if you only start with the organic bit, which is, we know we didn't do this well this year, so we need to fix that, and we know we did this well and it gave us some benefits, so we want to extend that. That's quite a non-dynamic strategy when you consider how fundamentally different the world is going to look in 10 years' time, and how rapidly these manufacturing value chains are changing. And my argument is that the lead firms, so the Toyotas, the BMWs, the Nissans, and if it's a tier 1, the Smiths and the Robert Bosches of the world, and the retailers, they don't have, as competent and as resourced as they are, they don't have the wisdom of Solomon. And they don't understand everything. So if you can see a long-term opportunity, and you can see how your particular product or the process that you're offering is going to enable them to be more competitive in the future, you've opened up the avenue for yourself to create value for them. Otherwise, it's always the lowest price wins, right? And then you go back to that smiling curve of value add, which is I can assemble it more cheaply than somebody else. And then once you've got the leanest possible processes and you as price competitive as you are, what else are you offering? It's pretty much a race to the bottom. you've got to find value. Speed, flexibility, reliability, green credentials, carbon footprint removal, creating value in the local community. Something that gives the anchor firm in that value chain a competitive advantage, and through that you gain for yourself a major advantage.
Thank you. I think that's a really fantastic way of thinking about where to start the pitch, which is, as you said, understanding the market, but really understanding the customer. And so I'd encourage everyone on the group, when we share the slides, you know who the dragons are, go and investigate them. They have publicly available websites, they produce reports, check them out to understand where they're moving towards. And then I think, again, using this 4P framework as a starting point to think about what value you could be adding to them. I think that's a nice way of framing it. You've touched on a few points. I mean, you noted green in retail, you've noted green again in autos. From a chemicals perspective, are you seeing similar trends? What does the 4P look like in a chemicals industry?
Okay, so I would argue that green in chemicals amplifies further. I mean, chemicals is, yeah, I mean, it's a real problem. So greening chemicals is probably an even more pressing issue than in any of the other value chains that I've worked in. The challenge with chemicals on the 4P is that, of course, chemicals is a cross-cutting supply industry. So it's hard to apply the 4P industry generally for chemicals. One has to apply it very specifically because you've got such discrete value, different types of value chains running through the chemical sector. So it's quite difficult to say whether, you know, apply the 4P framework. We need a very specific chemicals example to apply the 4P framework. But I would argue it does lie in with green, but not only with green. So take something like digital light synthesis, right, which is a particular technology around 3D printing. So 3D printing, there was a major breakthrough with actually soles, not the sole I've got up on the screen, but Adidas now have a 3D printing process using a particular technology that is chemicals based. So normally a 3D printing process, you know, some form of sintering if it's metal, it's some form of sort of plastic layering if it's plastics, but they're quite slow as a result. And what you've got with digital light synthesis is you've got a technology that essentially allows the growth of the 3D printed product through a chemical solution. So there's an example of and that's 100 times faster than the technology it replaced. So not like twice the speed or 5 times the speed or 10 times the speed, 100 times the speed. And it enabled Adidas to establish these fast factories. So there's an example of the opportunity, not only in relation to the green element, but in relation to the ability to provide customization, in relation to the ability to provide incredibly quick response capability. So I would argue that the green element is key because, you know, chemicals needs to become organic. I mean, chemicals all fully recyclable, using essentially chemicals that are being recycled in their whatever their physical form is, as opposed to using virgin material. And so that's going to be a major driver across all FMCG in the future. So in terms of detergents and soaps and all the rest of it, obviously, but chemicals is a critical input into autos. It's critical for dyeing and finishing in for example, clothing and textiles. And I would argue, depending on where it's at, you've got, you know, very similar pressure points in relation to this type of 4P framework. So if I was a dyeing and finishing operation, I'm either printing or I'm dyeing. You know, I'm under the same types of pressures to fully understand the 4P framework for my dyeing and finishing operation in respect of the value chain that I service.
Thank you. I think, yeah, this is a really valuable tool to use to explore a firm's position in industry, and to be able to highlight that very clearly to the dragons at the Dragon's Den. Professor, I feel like we have really tapped into the knowledge today, and I realize I've been drilling in terms of the questions. Maybe a final question, and this is a step away from the theory or the tools, and maybe just again, based on your experience. You know, what would you say to these SMEs who are now taking the step to present to industry? I mean, this is a really fantastic opportunity. You've seen small firms become very big firms, so you know what that opportunity can achieve with the right kind of levels of commitment, strategy, you know, people, etc., process. From your experience, what would you share with the firms on this call as they take this jump?
Two things. The one is, don't just understand value from your perspective. You have to understand the value to your customer. That is, in my view, especially with SMEs, you know, you've got to understand the customer value. And it goes back to core competencies. And for me, a core competence is one of three things. And you've got to demonstrate what your core competence is. So first of all, what is the value that you're adding that no one else can? How do you show that it's distinctive? So you've got to prove the value. You've got to show it's distinctive. You can do it, others can't. And the third thing you have to show is that it's hard to copy. Because if it's easy to copy, well, then they'll copy it. Somebody will copy it. It's not, you don't really have a defense in relation to what you want to do. So what is that? And for me, it starts with the customer value. How do you position yourself for that customer value? Because if you can identify that, and then the last one bit is authenticity, right? If you can then show that you're authentically positioned, whatever your limitations are, the biggest thing with SMEs, of course, is, you know, especially small firms starting off, is they desperately don't want to be small, but they are. So they want to project that they've got all of these amazing capabilities. And of course, they then often overrepresent themselves. And there's a fine line there between confidence and misrepresentation. And of course, in any environment where a lead firm with big resources and well-established experience of buying from firms, when they see that inauthenticity, the relationship is compromised. Even though the pitch is quite good, they can see the value, but they don't trust the voice. You've got to create those two links. One is you've got to be able to create the value linkage. And I'm not saying use 4P. You can use Porter's 5 forces, but you've got to show the linkage to the customer. And then you've got to show how you're capable of delivering it. And then, you know, it's the basis for essentially having your foot in the door. It's the basis for having established the initial, and that's the hardest bit. Because if you know what you're doing, and if you're authentic, so you're not oversold yourself, you've actually got the ability to follow through, you will grow that, right? And then depending on how effectively you're able to manage that process, you'll grow either slowly, reasonably, or very quickly. But the key is getting the access. And I'd argue those are the two big challenges initially.
Thanks, Professor. I think that's a fantastic way to close out your section. Understand the customer's value. Understand how you add value to the customer, how you're capable of delivering it, how it's hard to copy, and then bring your true authentic self to the presentation, and make sure that you don't misrepresent what you can achieve. So thank you so much for your time today. I'll let you go.
Good luck, everybody. I hope you make some awesome pictures. Good luck. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye. Great. So hopefully you found that of value. I think, again, the tools that were shared today will be in that presentation. You will be able to access it after the session. Really encourage you to go through it again. Obviously, for some of you, this may have been the first time you have been engaged with these tools. For others, You might have done all of this before, and that's okay. But again, it's trying to bring that into the pitch. I've seen a few questions as well come through around the pitch itself. And just like you to note, this, for some of you, this may be an introduction, but I go back to one of the previous slides, which showed, this program is to support you through all of that, to build your business strategy with some of the tools that the professor has shared today, but also in some of the resources that we'll share after this session, from the panel discussion we're going to have at 11, and then from that in-person support day that happens before the Dragon's Den, where we're bringing in coaches and mentors to help you build the foundation. You bring in the foundation and to help you build from that in terms of honing your strategy, honing your pitch, so that you bring your authentic your authentic self to the Dragon's Den, and going back to some of those key lessons to make sure that you can communicate the value that you bring to your customer and how you are capable of delivering it and how it is not easily copied by another. I've also seen some comments in the chat, and I'm going to take this opportunity to answer them now. And then we'll go into the comfort break in about 10 minutes. So just in terms of some of the questions that have been raised, what is expected of the business plan? Do we need financial forecasts? Whatever is best to present your 4Cs. So what is your capacity? What are your capabilities? What are your compliance level? And what is your competitiveness in terms of price? If you need financial forecasts to support you in presenting that to the Dragons, then bring it through to the Dragon's Den. And in that support day prior, we can help you hone that and make sure that it all links. If you do not have the financial forecasts in place, that is all right. Go back to the framework here. Let me just pull it up here. The business case really provides that support in terms of taking the opportunity that the Dragons have presented, an understanding of your standards, and then analyzing the costing model. So if you have a costing model that you can bring into the Dragon's Den, that's only going to strengthen your pitch. So I would encourage you to do it, but if you don't have it, but you still have a strong enough pitch to the Dragons and are selected, we will support you in building that in this phase of the program. Another question was on the type of investment that is on offer. Predominantly capital investment, but again, so investment in machinery and equipment. But again, it depends on the Dragon. So depending on what you bring into the Dragon's Den if you're looking for a particular type of investment, if you can convince a Dragon that that is the right investment for them, then there are, the opportunities are endless. Again, depends on what you pitch to the Dragons and what they sign off on. We are facilitating the program, but it is the Dragons who are making the procurement and investment decisions. So really it's about convincing them what they're willing, convincing them in terms of investment or procurement. There isn't a range on what the Dragons are willing to invest. As noted, we've had over 2 million Rand of investment in our previous rounds of the Accelerator. Again, depends on what you can bring to the pitch and what the Dragons are willing to invest in. Another question was on place in the store. Again, I keep saying it depends, but it's about building that business or that pitch to the Dragons. If you have a brand that you are trying to place in a store and you can convince them that they should find space in a store for you, well, then good for you. Again, the options are not limited to what you can propose to the Dragons. There was also a question on the regional nature or the location of supply. Most of these Dragons are national retailers, or they operate nationally. And so there is an opportunity that what you are supplying to them would be national. It might have to go to a different distribution center that sits outside of your province, depending again on the dragon and the nature of the relationship that you are able to establish with them. You know, things like logistics and cost of logistics, you would need to iron out with the dragon once they've selected you as part of the Dragon's Den. And then there was a final question on the dates. These dates that have been set are based around the availability of the dragons and the venues. And so the pitch at the Dragon's Den is a compulsory part of the program. We cannot move the Dragon's Den if an individual firm is unable to attend. These lead firms have committed their time for that day in particular. If there are any issues there, I'd encourage you to please get in touch with us via the Accelerator's email address. Robin, if you could just put that in the chat as well so people have access to it. You would have seen it in many of the mailers already, but you can contact us there and we can have a conversation further around that if there are issues, particularly around the dates. But we can't move the Dragon's Den, but very open to having a conversation about what is possible given your constraints. Okay, so I'm seeing a few more questions. And Robin is asking, is answering those questions in terms of the Dragon's Den dates. If there are any other questions on what has been presented so far, or on the Dragon's Den in particular, feel free to put them in the chat, see how we can answer them now. Otherwise, we can take a bit of a longer break. So as long as you're all back here by 11, so we can kick off the panel discussion, we can have a 3 minutes longer break than planned. Okay, I see the questions coming through in the chat are all around the dates and place of the pitch days. So I think that we can answer that via the chat. So let's take a break and I'll see you all here at 11 for the industry panel discussion with Anton Peters, Trevor Irons, and Daniel Sochen. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you at 11. Hi there. While people are taking a break, I did see one question around the dragons. So I'll just pull up the dragons list so you can all see it, should you be on the call at the moment. This will all be shared with everyone afterwards, but here are the dragons in the dragon's den. Hi, Daniel. We're just taking a short comfort break. We will start off at 11. How are you?
Hi, Courtney. Nice to meet you face to face.
Oh, yes, of course. I feel like we've met before, but it's on email.
Yes, that's right.
Daniel, joined by Anton Peters. He's also on the call. He'll be joining the panel discussion today. Anton, a slightly different industry from clothing and textiles, but I think the core themes in terms of SME pitch, the decisions that you as a lead firm make in investing and sourcing are probably universal. But I'm interested to see some of the differences today as well. So Anton, thank you for joining us.
Hi,
Deb.
Hi, Anton. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, good to meet you.
So I can see that mics and videos are working. You're more than welcome to turn them off, and then we'll kick off at 11 once the rest of the group is back from their break.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, Trevor. Nice to meet you. No. Trevor, I think you're on mute. Yeah. We're currently on a comfort break. The SMEs have just taken a 15-minute break. We'll start off at 11 o'clock. Trevor, you know Daniel very well, so I won't make that link, but I have Anton Peters on the call as well today. Anton, as I was saying to Daniel, from a slightly different industry, from clothing and textiles, but has spent about a quarter of a century in the industry, predominantly with Woolworths. And so I think today the panel discussion, we've got a variety on the call, given the various SMEs. But as I said in an email, I think a lot of the lessons or insight that you share today are sector agnostic. And so, yeah, interested to see the combination with the variety of the panel as well as with the SMEs. So thank you for joining us. And Anton, please meet Trevor, Anton.
Hi, Anton.
Hi, nice to meet you.
You as well.
Put my video on for a second. Where we? There we go.
Good meeting you, Anton. So have you been in the discussions leading up to this, or are you just entering now?
I've actually sat in and listened, so just really for my own input. So yeah, it's been quite interesting so far. Yeah, I haven't participated until now. I've just listened into the discussions previously and Justin's presentation.
Okay, all right. Pleased to meet you.
Likewise.
And Tom, just so that you're aware, Trevor and I work for the same group.
So I picked up. I've don't worry. I looked you up.
The two sister companies will probably dovetail a bit in our contributions.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Great.
We have quite a variety of SMEs on the call. About 15 to 20 chemicals firms, 15 autos firms, and the conversation that we had previously on strategy touched a bit on autos as well. So well represented in the conversation. And then about 40 of the SMEs are clothing and textiles based over Cape Town and KZN. We have about 50 on the call. I see a few have dropped off, and I'd imagine they'll be rejoining at 11. So as I say, quite a variety in the group today.
Courtney, who is Robin?
Sure. So Robin van Lauren is my colleague at BMN Analyst. She's been with us for a few months now. She is the project manager on the accelerators. So you'll, especially at the in-person events, you'll be seeing her quite a lot. So Robin, I'll let you introduce yourself to the panel.
Yeah. Hi everyone. It's nice to meet you. I've seen your names mentioned and flown around various documents. So it is very nice to see everyone in person. Like Courtney said, I've recently joined the team and I am one of the project managers on the business accelerator. So my focus is solely on the accelerator. But it's very nice to meet you all.
Good meeting you as well.
Great. So it's gone 11 o'clock and I'd like to kick us off. I see a few people rejoining. So I'd like to welcome the SMEs back to this discussion. We've gone on a bit of a journey in terms of introducing them to the program, how it differs from other accelerators in terms of putting market access or investment opportunity up front and then upgrading afterwards. And we've had about an hour discussion lecture on business strategy and some of the tools that you can use to understand your customer's value, what value you then bring to the customer, how you can show that you're capable of delivering it, and then the balancing between trying to sell your business but then remain authentic to what you're actually capable of achieving with the support either through investment or procurement opportunities. So that's where we've gone on the journey in terms of balancing the ingredients needed to go into the Dragon's Den. And what we have here is an industry panel discussion to give you an insight into, what the Dragons could be thinking on the day. Anton Peters, Trevor Irons, and Daniel Sochen are all have I'd say decades of experience in terms of working with firms, sourcing and investing in SMEs and larger firms as well. They've run their own businesses and departments, so they are acutely aware of what it takes to be successful in manufacturing. Anton Peters' focus has predominantly been in retail, clothing and textiles in particular. And Trevor Irons and Daniel Sochen. Trevor is Managing Director of NCS Resins, and Daniel Sochen is Managing Director of Ferrocoating Resins and Ferrodispersions, predominantly in the chemical space. But as I was saying to them while the SMEs were on the break, the lessons and insights that they can share in terms of their experience in these industries, working with SMEs, investing, hearing business pitches. I think it's worth noting that Trevor and Daniel were the pioneers in the Durban Chemicals cluster in terms of setting up this business accelerator. Those lessons are sector agnostic. And so for the automotive and furniture firms on the call, I think there's a lot of value in this conversation. And I'd encourage you to please engage as much as any of the other sectors in terms of raising questions with the panel. So I'm going to stop talking. It's not about me. It's about Trevor, Daniel, and Anton today. I'll maybe just kick off asking each of you to share your experience to date. How have you now reached this position, and who you are, what you do. So Anton, I'll start with you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Anton Peters. I've been in the industry for a bit longer than the 25 years that Courtney's put in. And thank you for that very complimentary picture that you put up. That's a good number of years ago. And so I started out in retail back in the 80s, where probably most of you weren't even born yet, but I started on the shop floor. I a small business run by a very well-known Jewish family that knew the clothing industry so well, and I learned so much in the years that I spent in that business. I then had a stint in manufacturing, working on a range, a menswear range, predominantly women's wear retailer. A women's wear manufacturer. It was Spint of the Clothing, which closed down many years ago. In my own business, I obviously had to get involved in. And if anybody knows what Green Market Square was like many years ago, that's where I had a store and like some exciting things. We used to do lots of testing and overdyes and garment processing to do something different. And I used to sell shirts and shorts on the square and also into some of the quick market around the country. And then I started working for Allergen Company. Allergen Company many years ago was a lead denim retailer in the country, was the first retailer to bring Levi's in. And then we also manufactured our own products, mainly our own allergens, and eventually I was involved in Samson Clothing, which was owned by Sky Products, which Ale bought Sky Products years ago, and a lot manufactured locally. But I did everything from sourcing all the raw materials, from fabrics, labels, trims, zips, everything you need to make the garment, and manage the production in South River as well. And then I went to work for a company called Fifth Element Market. It was one of the key suppliers with Woolworths. This connection began. I used to spend most of my time in China at that time because Fifth Element was basically an importer. So we would trade. And in the years that for Fifth Element, I learned a lot about what productivity was all about. I understood where the negative China at that stage was. I also understood how productive they were and the work ethic that they had, and they still have, and how to try and bring that into our local market to basically increase our productivity as well. To Woolworths, and spent my last 13 years of my corporate working career at Woolworths. And there I was involved in mainly buying management in the first couple of years in kidswear, and then management, then went into men's management, and in the last in my time at Woolworths, I was the project manager for local renewal. which is where my focus and my passion is today, in identifying and developing SMEs to be able to deal with large retail. And I fully understand the challenges that go with that and how to go through that transformation process of equipping yourselves to deal with large retail. Large retails, it's a monster. They're very demanding. They can suck everything out of you, but if you get the processes in place and everything that Justin has spoken about earlier on, you can set yourself up for success and really grow a very successful large business. And then at the end of last year, I went into semi-retirement, I would call it, starting my own consultancy, working still with a number of the SMEs that I was connected to with Woolworths, and continuing that journey with them. We've had a few great success stories, and I'm still on the lookout for exactly that, finding small business that have the capability to transform. So that's me.
Great, thanks, Anton, and really looking forward to hearing more as we go through in terms of what you look for from sourcing from SMEs. But I'll hand over to Trevor. Trevor, who are you and what do you do?
Thanks, Courtney. I'm actually an engineer by qualification, studied at Wits University. After Wits, I moved on into the working world and I worked back a bursary for SAPI. So I was in the pulp and paper industry for about 4 to 5 years. And as an engineer, I had some excellent development work there. I didn't just supervise mechanical projects, but did everything from civil electrical instruments to even process engineering. And from there, I've been working for the Ferro Group since 2006. And the Ferro Group basically grew over the years, grew through acquisition and also through internal efficiencies. And during that time, I was the engineering and operations manager and director eventually. So I largely ran projects and improvement projects until we did a big merger where we merged with other chemical companies. And we formed ultimately a business as to what it is today called Bud Group. So from 2016, I ended up running NCS Resins, which was a subsidiary of the Ferro Group at the time, and is now a subsidiary of Bud Group. And in that role, I now oversee the key Exco team. So from sales operations to HR, purchasing. And in this position, we are taking on a big task where we are redefining our strategy jointly with Daniel's team, which I'll let him talk to as well. And we're trying to be relevant in the field of sustainability. So we're in the chemical sector, and we know that chemicals can get a bad rap and a bad name. And we're trying to change the course of that for in the context of a South African business. With the size and scale that we have, it does have challenges, but we believe there is opportunity, and we are going for it. So you'll see I've got this Earthkind platform over here, and that was launched beginning of the year. And that's where we're putting a lot of focus at the moment in trying to find out where SMEs can actually fit in and assist us in achieving our purpose under the Earthkind platform. Thank you, Courtney.
Great, thank you, Trevor. I'm going to come back to you because I think it'd be useful for the group to hear about how you and Daniel have pioneered the Accelerator program in the DCC. But I'm going to hand over to Daniel. But just to know now, I'm definitely going to circle back to you. Daniel, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Greetings. It's Dan. My name is Daniel Sochen. I have been in business for 40 years. Sounds horrific. Started off in the agricultural world in the sugar industry, and then I joined Shell Oil, and then I've been 30 years in the resin game, chemical industry. My experience has been very much industrial sales and then leading into general management. And I've been MD for about 10 years now on two businesses. As Trevor said, we we are part of the same group. We weren't 5 or 6 years ago. And so apart from the running of 2 companies, Trevor and my businesses are very close to each other. We share a lot of services together. But we've also been very involved, as Trevor's been saying, in mergers, acquisitions, and restructuring of businesses. So a fair amount of experience between the 2 of us. That's really my background.
Thanks, Daniel. And maybe I'll open actually this question up to you and Trevor, because I know you've both been very heavily involved. The concept, this accelerator, as I was explaining to the group earlier, is different to other, either investments programs or business accelerators, in that it puts the investment or market opportunity up front, and then it's about upgrading afterwards to meet the needs of the lead firm. How did you two come to creating this accelerator with the Durban Chemicals Cluster? What were some of your motivations in leading it?
If I can start, the 2 of us are on the executive committee of the chemical cluster. But then in our individual businesses, we are trying to meet our BE needs in our scorecard. We found that we were writing our checks every year to a third-party organization we happen to be in Joburg to invest in trying to get a supply development price. And after a period of time, the 2 of us got our heads together with the DCC and said, look, we want to bring this closer to home. We want to try and identify potential suppliers, for our own businesses, but also for the greater chemical industry in Durban. And how can we do that? So that's how we came up with this concept of it starts a program where we can track potential suppliers, even if in time they don't supply our own company, but can supply the greater chemical industry. So Trevor, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, I think, Daniel, you basically hit the nail on the head. It was all about getting closer to candidates rather than sort of get the accolades through a third party. And by doing that, we were able to actually start getting a little bit more strategic as to how we could work with SMEs. Some are straightforward, but others we've actually got some good aspirations that we're trying to fill at the same time.
Fantastic. And I think that leads quite nicely to my first question, which is, either from the accelerator, from, other engagements in terms of sourcing or investing, what have you tended to look for in an SME? Anton, maybe I'll start with you. What are you looking for when you're trying to invest or source from an SME?
Well, usually when there's quite an echo somewhere. Usually when we start, the process is it's so important to understand product capability from the SME and whether they have a focus on a certain type of product or whether they do a wide range of products and what they believe their strengths are. So it's understanding the product capability and especially their strength in a specific type of product. And then to understand exactly what value they could bring to the table and understand when you're working with a local supplier, it's probably one of the biggest challenges because the competition is offshore. And so what we tend to do is to identify the import replacement opportunities. So I think that's always first prize because it talks to the government master plan in the clothing industry. And so if we can identify an import replacement program that you can actually develop and it's going to have longevity and it's got potential for growth, that is so important, which ties back to their product capability. And then it would be exactly what systems, what do they have in place? Do they have quality management? Do they have compliancy in terms of bargaining council, safety, and also depending on the retailer, there would be certain safety requirements depending on the product type that they have to offer. For argument's sake, For Woolworths Kidswear, there's quite stringent safety requirements to be able to supply a product into Woolworths in the baby space, especially. That will be metal detection, a clear needle policy, etc., etc. So all of those need to be in place, and then obviously strong leadership in a business. So do they have strong leadership, or what development needs would they have? Processes is important, and an IT infrastructure. So to be able to deal with the large retailers, you need to have access to IT or computer equipment. And it might sound simple, but quite often you go into a factory where they don't even have those in place, but they can make a fantastic product. So it doesn't stop you from engaging, but it's to understand what their development needs are. And also attention to detail is critical for any supplier, especially in the clothing industry, understanding attention to detail and also understanding critical path. So, and most of the time when we identify a small clothing manufacturer, they are working as a CMT. And it's to take them through that transformation from a CMT into a fully fledged supplier, which means they might not currently be purchasing any raw materials. They might not need to do any cutting, etc., etc. And so we do understand, while looking for all of these things in a firm, that probably a lot of them would be lacking because they are operating as a CMT, but that doesn't stop us from engaging. So as much as we look for all of these things, it doesn't actually hinder the process. It's just identifying the development needs.
Thanks, Anton, for that. I'm going to hand over to Trevor, but just to note, I've taken the presentation down. It was, even though my hands are off the mouse, seemed to be moving around. So I'll repeat the questions just in case. But Trevor, on your end, when you've looked to either source, and I know in particular invest in SMEs, what have you been looking for from firms?
So it was actually good to hear you say that in the preceding rounds of this accelerator session, that the candidates have been touching on value and value add in the market. So I don't think you can underplay value add, and you hear it, you read it in business books, you hear it on the radio. You actually have to focus on it. You actually have to go and take time to understand what is value add. And if I have to give everybody a bit of a pointer, go research the value pyramid by Bain & Company. The value pyramid gives you a good infographic as to how value is disseminated through the market or between B2B and B2C. And the number one problem that everybody makes is that they always have to be cost competitive, when costs can also show itself through durability, which is ultimately quality. And at the end of the day, your customer saves through having a more durable component. But then there's other aspirational parts of value. And if you look at, to put it in the context of a chemical business, 70 up to 75%, depending on what product you're making, of our total turnover can be raw materials that come to us in the form of commodities. So if you're a small player that doesn't have a 400,000 ton plant in your backyard, how are you trying to develop yourself as a supplier to the chemical industry? Well, the important thing about something that is so significant on our books is that it is very precious to us, and how we handle it in our process. Do we create rejects? How can you help us avoid making rejects? And more importantly, the closer you are to servicing the market and servicing that market, how do we differentiate ourselves in servicing that market? So you don't necessarily have to come in as a raw material supplier or supply option, but you could partner with us in the process in how we differentiate ourselves in servicing our market at the end of the day. And the one big thing that you have being on South African soil compared to being offshore is, in the commodities game and in the specialty chemicals game, is proximity to market is key. How you can differentiate yourself as a service offering. So what do we look for ultimately? And wrapping that whole speech up, we look for SMEs that can bring a unique value add to the way in which we supply our somewhat commoditized specialty chemicals to our customers that gives us an existential leap in value and pain point removal from our customers.
Thanks, Trevor. Yeah, I think going back to the point you said at the beginning, it's that understanding the value. And for firms who are in a position where they don't know this, you need to go start and search. In the previous conversation, looking at some of the tools to think about value and where you fall in terms of product, process, paradigm shift. But yeah, thank you again. This cannot to this group emphasize this enough in understanding your value add.
Can I perhaps just give you 2 examples to build on from Trevor?
Of course.
Made about, we're a very specialized industry and our raw materials come out of petrochemicals. So we've been trying to look at where else we can get value, and to use 2 examples from recent years. In our Accelerator is the one company that pitched to us called Ocean Plastics, was actually recycling plastic from the townships. And Trevor's team in particular has done a lot of work with them. And we're going to, with our whole sustainability theme and this Earthkind initiative that Trevor has, is we are going to partner with Ocean Plastics in using some of his recovered plastic and possibly using it in some of our products. There's a very good example of value add, that we haven't thought of before. Another one which we didn't use, but in the whole world of digitization and getting closer to market, we had a company or an SME that pitched about 2 or 3 years ago, but he was in the agricultural space and he was trying to design an app for small growers up in Zululand as to where they could find raw materials. Because being small growers, they didn't know where to go and find their chemicals or their fertilizer or whatever. And this was in the very early stage of development, but it appealed to us a lot. So, I mean, there were 2 pitches in the chemical industry that had nothing to do with, the big petrochemical industry. It was value add projects.
And Daniel, to that point around the value add products, is there anything else you're looking for in an SME? So we know it's about the value they bring. You've spoken quite a bit around the sustainability initiatives. Anything else that's on your radar for this round of the Accelerator? Or is there even like a characteristic of an SME that you've seen and makes you want to invest or source from them?
It's a difficult question because at the end of the day, it's we've talked about products and services and value add. So there is a whole range of products that we use, but it's what I call the boring services, things like office cleaning and security and stationery, and it's a very competitive space. So there it gets down to rands and cents very often and how competitive you can be. On the services side, yes, there's this whole value added thing to our industry that we're always looking for new ideas. I mean, it reminds me many years ago of talking to a counselor at university. It was actually trying to work out what degree my son was going to do. And he said that the job he's going to do hasn't been invented yet. And I'm sure there are ideas out there that we haven't thought of, that someone can come and help us. So we're looking for day-to-day products and services, but we're also looking for new ideas and thinking out the box.
Thanks, Daniel. And I think that moving on to the next question, we earlier were discussing, what do you need to bring into your pitch? We spoke about with the group as it's bringing your business strategy in, it's understanding your USP or your value add, understanding what your customer is looking for, but then it's being able to communicate that and make a compelling pitch. Trevor, maybe I'll start off with you. What have you seen that makes a compelling pitch? I'll leave that question quite broad because you've seen so many, but what was that special something that made it compelling?
Somebody who drives home the pain points from the get-go. Don't stall too long in trying to get to that pain point. Once you get to the pain point, you get that person's attention. And then that person sort of says, well, how can you solve that for me? Because I can relate. And that's where you bring your unique selling point or your value proposition to the table. So that to me is a mark of a good start. And then the tangibility of your offering. Are you in ideation phase? You need to clearly articulate whereabouts you are in this discovery. Are you seeking seed capital? Are you seeking angel funding to progress an idea that could potentially benefit the person you're pitching to? Or have you developed it quite far that you've actually got a pilot and you'd like to now test it in a real life scenario? Whereabouts you are in the maturation of your business is also quite key. So you can manage the expectations. Are you trying to test a minimum viable product for your customer you're pitching to? Because you can very quickly lose the customer in terms of, is this doable or not? Is it just an idea they've got, or is this something I can expect you to deliver on in a week or two? Should we agree to this going forward?
And Anton, from your perspective, obviously slightly different sector, but what have you seen, any alignment with what Trevor's sharing now in terms of what makes a compelling pitch? And what have you seen from your engagements with firms? Anton, you're on mute.
Sorry, it's so important to immediately capture that there's passion and confidence in their business, that they've got a clear vision to what they want to achieve. And obviously it feeds into a strategy. So do they have a strategy, or most important is their honesty about what their development needs are. So in their pitch, I think it's so important for them to not leave that to the tail end of everything that they bring to the table, but to be honest about what their development needs are. But so important to have the passion, to have a business plan of some sort, because we know that there's a process that needs to be followed, and maybe they would still be in the middle of that process. It's so important to have believability in what they bring into you. So really believe that that they're genuine, that it's not something that is a structure that that's been presented to them, but they are personally involved in pulling this together, that you really believe them as an individual, that it's not something that somebody gave to them to actually bring as a pitch. And it's so important to actually be able to pick that up and it'll come through in their passion and their confidence for what they bring to the table. They also would need to have identified the gap. So I think we spoke about the retailers. The retailers are along this process is so important for them to understand the gap that they need to fill, and that is that import replacement opportunity. So it's pointless chasing after, for argument's sake, another t-shirt when there are hundreds of t-shirt suppliers in the industry that can service those retailers. But to find the gap of, and again, it talks back to that import replacement product, which is difficult. It's a challenge because most of the time, and that's the very reason why it's been made offshore, for various reasons. Sometimes it's for value, sometimes it's just the complexity of the garment. But at the end of the day, for us to be able to grow the local clothing manufacturing back to where it was back in the 80s and 90s, it's a process that we need to follow. And I think there's a commitment to doing that. And so it mustn't be seen as a stumbling block, but to also understand that there's a customer that needs to be serviced, and that customer is getting a lot more sort of picky and curious about product, where the product is sourced, the innovation around the product, the sustainability around that product. And it talks back to, again, a unique product opportunity. So I think in terms of that compelling pitch, really just around their passion, their confidence, knowing exactly what the SWOT analysis is of their business, so that they fully understand their strengths, their weaknesses, their opportunities and their threats, and really the believability in what they bring into the table.
Thanks, Anton. It's interesting to hear the slight nuances, obviously, given the sector focus, but again, this common theme around pain points, viability. What are you actually asking for? Definitely sector agnostic. And Daniel, the same question to you. From your experience, what have you seen makes a compelling pitch? And maybe I'll add an additional question to that is, what have you seen that makes a pitch fall flat on its face?
I think, without wanting to scare anyone, I don't think it's so much a good or a bad pitch as a well-prepared or a less well-prepared pitch. And I think the two other panelists have covered a lot of it. The one thing I'd like to add to it is, and it's probably covered in the pain point, is sort of cash flow analysis. Over the past 3 years, we had several cases where there were great ideas, and we said, well, we eventually got to the point of, what are you looking for? And they said, whatever the figure was, $500,000. And we said, great, for what? And how are you going to repay it? And how many units are you expecting to sell to get? And we found weaknesses in a couple of pitches around the financial element. So yes, wanting to develop SMEs, there's also a financial cost benefit to us. And that is a pain point that you've got to cover in quite a bit of detail.
Thanks, Daniel. And maybe the same question then to Trevor. What makes a pitch fall flat on its face that you've seen?
Yeah, almost goes into your advice, which would probably be your next question as to how to avoid that, but definitely not knowing your numbers. So when you're sitting up there and you're fumbling and you're sort of winging it a bit, it comes across that you're not well prepared for your presentation. And the more prepared you are, the more convincing you're going to be, the more you're going to highlight that you are the jockey. It's not so much about the business in as much as it is about you delivering that service or product. And that's why we will not go out and look for anybody else, but take you on to test the next stage or two going forward.
And to that point, what you've spoken about my next question, which is, any tips for the firms? What can they be doing to, we've spoken about value, so they need to understand their value. Is there anything that they could be doing now in the next few weeks that is going to prepare them to make sure their pitch doesn't fall flat on their face? What would be some of your kind of insider tips to the firms on the call?
So I'd definitely say do your research. Don't just jump onto our websites. That's when people say, I've done your research. They go onto your website and then they think they know all about the business. Go further than that. Go research what the challenges are for the industry. Go research where the industry is moving in megatrends internationally. How does your offering and your unique selling points align with those megatrends? We've given you a heads up as to what those megatrends are, for example. So how can you tailor that? And therefore, you'll slowly discover and chip away at what those unique selling points are and that pain point is, and you'll understand whether you can pitch or not, or you're wasting your time. So yeah, your research is not just jumping onto the website, it's going a lot wider, some breadth, and bringing some relevance, because then you'll start talking to what we're researching, what we're doing, and what we're following.
And Anton, the same question to you. Maybe first to give you an opportunity to share if you've seen any pitches fall on their face, what were some of the common trends? And then from there, what can firms be doing over the next few weeks to prepare them to put their best foot forward in the Dragon's Den?
I think it's I think where you fall flat on your face is that if your pitch is completely unrealistic. And in terms of the product types that you wanting to supply, in terms of your access to raw materials or your financial constraints, I think be realistic in all of those and focus on your strengths, but understand your weaknesses. And then have a clear vision statement for your business. So what does the future position of your business look like? And create a mission statement so you've got clear objectives of where you want to be and what you need to do to reach those objectives. And a business plan is what's been touched on, which is so important, to have a clear business plan with a financial forecast. Without a financial forecast and understanding your overheads, understanding your costs, understanding what, and especially looking for those hidden costs. I think what's happened so often is that people forget all those hidden costs in terms of, especially when we talk about garment manufacturing. We get going with a great product, a costing model that seems real, but at the end of the day, once you get started and you start looking at the actual forecast, you find that they're starting to run into the red very quickly. And so it's so important to spend a lot of time on that cash flow and look for everything in terms of overhead, because it'll catch up with you very quickly if you don't identify them from the very beginning. So business plan, I think, is so important with a solid financial forecast.
Thanks, Anton. Daniel, the same question to you. Any tips that you would give to the SMEs in developing their pitch over the next few weeks?
Again, I think a lot of it has been said already, so I'm probably going to go a bit more on the what's the word, relaxed point of view. Just remember that as much as we call it a dragon's den, we are not dragons. I mean, we're looking to achieve, a couple of objectives in developing small companies, helping people, and obviously if it can have benefit for our business as well. So have sort of, everything that's been said about business plans and cash flows, but yeah, just be yourself. Do your research, have some passion, and just as a bit of amusement, in one of our previous Dragon's Dens we had, and it was possibly a bit intimidating, a big mock dragon in the front of the room, and we had smoke bellowing out every time someone walked up to do their presentation until we set the fire alarms off in the hotel. So, in hindsight, we said to ourselves that had been, trying to be clever marketers, we had intimidated people. It's not that at all. It's just be yourself and be prepared.
Yeah.
Thanks, Daniel. I think that's a nice insight into the Dragon's Den, and maybe I'll ask Trevor to continue that trend. What could the SMEs expect in the Dragon's Den? You and Daniel have had a few rounds in the Dragon's Den before. The SMEs going in, what day can they expect?
So did you ask what day? Okay,
yeah,
so
the experience. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. So on the experience on the day. So as you know, we don't necessarily get 100% hands-on with the setting up of the day. We use B&M analysts to assist us with that. And over the last 3 years, they've certainly moved the needle from starting out in our humble days at the Durban ICC to now being at the Pearls in Umhlanga. And I believe that the venue is there again. And every year it gets a lot more dramatic. And I'd say it gets as close as damn it as to what you almost see on stage when you watch the Dragon's Den or the Shark Tank. We are just short of a lift. I'm sure we could use the lift in the foyer to get that one working, so it gives it more authentic. But to give you a look and feel, there's lots of lights, there's smoke, as Daniel says. You can expect to feel slightly intimidated from that, but Daniel said it best. Just take it easy, relax. There will be cameras. People will be wanting to interview you if you're coming into the final rounds, to ask about your business, because we like to give you some of that marketing as well, which is part of our value add for your business. And then, yes, I think the other thing not to underestimate is the connections you make on that day. You find that the finalists start sitting together, talking, exchanging business cards. So make sure you bring your business cards. You have lunch, you have tea together. So you actually have an opportunity to network and possibly make new friends. So yeah, I think I might have painted it as best as I can. Daniel?
Great, thanks, Trevor. Daniel, any other insider tips in terms of the Dragon's Den day for the rest of the group? And then from there, I'll ask you maybe to give your closing comments to the group here.
I think, Trevor summed it up. It can be seen as intimidating, but it's not. There are lots of lights, cameras, action, music, but just also lots of networking. The number of people we've met and engaged with over tea and lunch, and yes, not everyone can win, but it's a great learning experience. So enjoy it.
Great, thanks, Daniel. And Anton, final question to you. What would your closing comments be to the group here today? Anton, you're on mute.
Believe in yourself, believe in your product, believe in your strategy. That's what takes it. It's believability. That's what's going to win. That's going to make you win and be the cut above somebody else.
Great, thanks, Anton. And Trevor, closing comments from you to the group. Trevor, you're on mute.
Yeah, I think if anything you want to take away from this is it's another opportunity to improve your pitch. You never ever give up the opportunity to improve your pitch. It's an elevator pitch that you ultimately want to have in your back pocket all the time. Sell that whole story within 60 seconds, but you've got more than 60 seconds this time. You've also got a chance to listen to the Dragons to help you polish that pitch on the day, take it to heart, use it, and improve it. If you get turned away, doesn't necessarily mean that your business is a failure or your idea is a failure. It just means that it maybe didn't work in the context of this particular opportunity. Keep going, keep pushing, and as Anton says, believe in yourself, and that will come through and that will shine.
Great. Trevor, Anton, Daniel, thank you so much for your time today, sharing your experience and I think really great insider tips to the rest of the group. I've seen a few comments already, just people really excited by what you're sharing. So thank you. And yeah, see you in the Dragon's Den.
Courtney, if I just may use this opportunity to say, since we have got clothing, textiles and automotive here at the same time that we're talking on behalf of, we've been developing opportunities for reusing recyclable PET in the form of bottles is the easiest and most obvious one. But because we've got our colleagues out of the clothing and textiles area, what I would like to reveal is that we've done a lot of testing of waste polyester clothing. And we would like to get more engaged in the sector, and we would like to see where we can actually get sources of polyester clothing. The sources we've got have had the challenges, pain points, of being mixed with cotton and also having other types of elastomers and polyesters and polymers in them, so your elastic bands. Where you can offer value is that we don't want to be in the field of waste separation and sorting. If you can pre-sort, find sources that have good feedstocks that won't go dry, feast and famine, where we could assess your polyester supplies. A good example is we know that about a couple of months ago, I think pre-pandemic, SARS ring-fenced a whole lot of counterfeit clothing. And it was majority football tops and shirts, and they burnt it all. It's very sad to hear that because we actually could have recycled that. It would be nice to know that if SARS intends on recycling any more athletic gear, which is largely polyester, we might want to actually put it back in the ecosystem through recircular methods rather than put off CO2 emissions and burning it. So yeah, that's open for people who might be in that space and who are in the clothing and textile space, know that it's a pain point for that area, goes to landfill, but it's mixed at this point in time.
Thanks, Trevor. To anyone on the call who feels that that's an opportunity that they could service, please email us and we can make that connection or enter you into the Chemicals Dragon's Den as well, an opportunity to pitch twice. Okay. And is there any other closing comments or questions, Daniel, Anton, Trevor? Thank you so much for your time and for your insights. I think this has been really valuable.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Bye.
Pleasure.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Great. So to everyone on the call, I hope you found that panel discussion insightful. I certainly did, and I'm quite aware of what this program entails. Really useful insight from Anton, Daniel, and Trevor, and hopefully that will guide you in developing your pitches based on some of the tools that have been shared by Professor Barnes, but also give you a bit of insight into what to expect on the Dragon's Den day. As they noted, it may be a bit intimidating, but as you can see, Daniel, Trevor, they are human beings. They are committed to the development process of the Accelerator, and all the Dragons are. They've signed up knowing that this is about market access and investment, but also about development. And so hopefully that reduces some of the anxiety you may feel pitching your business. We have 13 minutes left, and I'm going to use the last 13 minutes just to go over the next steps. So what can you expect in the pitch? We've had a lot of conversations today around this pitch, pitching your business, understanding your value to your customer, understanding what the customer values. Are you capable of delivering it? We've, as noted by Anton and Daniel, as well as Trevor, making sure you have your numbers in place. So your cash flow analysis, if you're looking for investment, what are you asking for? What are you going to use it for? And being very clear on your expectations from investments. So this business pitch is an introduction to your business. It's an opportunity to give your ideas and potential a voice. It should give your audience a very clear understanding of your business plan and be delivered in a way that leaves them engaged. So, you know, you can stand up there and read from a piece of paper. It's unlikely that that is going to inspire investment or procurement confidence. There is a level of showmanship, and that's something that we'll be supporting you on in that pitch support day, which Robin has spoken to in the chat. It also is an opportunity for the Dragons to ask you further questions. So again, as noted by the panelists, encourage you to do your homework because you may receive some questions that are not in your presentation and you need to be prepared to answer them. And ultimately, you're trying to pursue a commercial opportunity with these Dragons. So it's about the believability, as Anton said, in what you're offering them. So some of the main points worth considering in your business pitch: who are you pitching to? So, you know, as Trevor said, go onto the website of these firms, but then go and do your homework further. See what this industry is asking from the firms. What are the global trends? Who is the firm that you're pitching to? Important that you understand that and understand what they value. You need to know what your pitch is going to contain. So what are you asking from the firm? Is it procurement? Is it investment? And what would you like to achieve in that? So, you know, what type of investment? Trevor noted, is it angel capital? Is it seed capital? Are you testing a pilot project, or are you an established business looking for an investment partner? And then how should the pitch be delivered? There are many ways that you could deliver your pitch. Obviously, it's an in-person event and you're going to have to stand and do, you know, go through your pitch, but you can bring in a video of your factory or your service if you feel that that would support your pitch. For any of you who have a product which is safe to travel with, so not the chemicals firms, but clothing or furniture, bring your product to the pitch. Put it on stage. Let the Dragons touch and feel what you're trying to sell them or for them to invest in. And as I said as well, you're more than welcome to bring a video of your premises or your services as well. I think by now you know who you're pitching to. These are large customers who are interested in sourcing or investing from you as a potential supplier. And now to go back to what should the pitch contain, we've really covered this topic a lot, but again, just to note it. Introduction, who are you? What is your value proposition? So what problem, going back to Trevor's point, what is the pain point you're trying to solve? Can you present your prototype, a video, or your actual product or service to the group? Who are your customers currently? Who do you want your customers to be in the future? Finances, what is the current state of your business? So going back to Daniel's point on a cash flow analysis, very important. Team, who are the people behind your business? So is it yourself? Do you have a team with you? Very valuable to bring that out in your pitch. And then your roadmap. What have you accomplished so far? And what are your next steps? And how will the financial or procurement opportunity support you achieve your goals on that roadmap? And then closing. How can we contact you? What are the next steps that you would like to take with these dragons? Okay, I'm just checking to make sure I'm not missing any questions. Robin, if you see any questions pop up, feel free to unmute and just let me know. I see a question. Oh, Robin has answered the question, but the question was, how long should the pitch be? No more than 5 minutes. And again, that pitch support day, the day before, will help you hone that. So the pitch should be 5 minutes. PowerPoint or Canva, which is a presentation software. Again, we will share all of these resources with you in terms of some templates you can use after the session. And it's optional to include a video overview of your business as well. For 5 minutes, we expect that to be about 10 to 12 slides, but if it's any less or any more, that's fine. It's really about keeping to that 5-minute pitch time. We are not going to obviously throw you out after 5 minutes, but again, it's important to present within the 5-minute slot, because also the dragons have only a certain attention span, and we need space for questions and answers as well. So in order to move into the dragon's den, we need to see what your pitch is. So this pitch is a draft pitch. It doesn't have to be completely finalized, but it needs to be the foundation on which we can build. So we have an in-person pitch support day that's before the dragon's den. We need you to submit your draft presentation before then, and potentially a supporting video as well if you have one, so that we can ensure that there is something that we can build on in the pitch support day. Should you not submit a pitch presentation should you not present that pitch presentation, we either will take it as a sign that you no longer want to participate in the program, or we will not be able to take you to the next stage, because we do need to see that there is something, there's a foundation on which we can build in the pitch support day. So please note these deadlines on your screen. And if you have any questions, please contact us on accelerators@bmnanalyst.com. Robin has shared that email address in the chat. So what are the pitch days? What are these deadlines? So these are the deadlines to submit your pitch. You need to submit it via the link that we will share after this session. These are the deadlines to when you need to submit this pitch. So this could be a PowerPoint presentation or a video. The video is optional, but the PowerPoint presentation is necessary to submit by these days, so that we can ensure that you have the right ingredients to go into the in-person support days. So once you join the pitch support day, these are the dates: the 11th for furniture and clothing in KZN, the 24th for Cape Town, the 20th for Cape Town clothing and textiles, the 29th for chemicals, and the 29th for automotive industry as well. These are the pitch support days. So these are the days where you will come in, and for a whole day, the focus is on developing that draft pitch that you've shared prior, honing your communication skills, and making sure you have all the right ingredients to present to the dragon. So we've spoken about your value proposition, pain points, cash flow analysis. We're going to be making sure you have all of those ingredients in your pitch, so that when you go into the dragon's den on these days, you are fully prepared. As I said earlier, what are the ingredients of your dragon's den? It's about your business strategy. It's about your unique selling proposition. And it's also being able to communicate that effectively. And that pitch support day really ties that all together. So it's crucial that you're able to attend both of these events so that you are prepared for the dragon's den. As noted in the chat, but just to note again, where are these events happening? At quite nice locations, I might add. The Pearls in Umhlanga for all the KZN based pitch days. So if you're in the automotive, chemicals, furniture, or KZN clothing and textiles, you will be at the Pearls. And for Cape Town, which is clothing and textiles, You'll be at 15 on Orange, which is in the middle of town. Just making sure there are any questions. So if you are based in Cape Town, then you would be at the Cape Town Clothing and Textiles event. But as Robin has said, we'll follow up on your question after the session. Okay, well, it's 3 minutes to 12, and I'll close off there just by saying thank you so much for your time today and your questions. I hope that this has been an informative session. I hope you feel like you understand what this program is, what it aims to achieve, and I hope you feel inspired. I think as shared by the panelists, there is a real opportunity here for investment and procurement. We have seen really fantastic results over the last few years from an investment perspective, from growth, from job creation, and we are excited to be going on this journey with you now as well. So thank you for your time, and also thank you to our funders for their continued support. This is funded by both national, provincial and local governments, the Eastern Cape Development, Environment Affairs and Tourism Department, the eThekwini Municipality, the Department of Development, Tourism and Environmental Affairs in KZN, the City of Cape Town, the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, and funded through the Industrial Development Corporation. So special mention to our funders for supporting this program and for their continued support. So I'll close off there. Thank you, everyone. If you have any questions at all, please contact us on our email address. Wishing you all a great day further and good luck with your pitch support, with your pitch development. Really excited to see you all at the pitch support days. So thank you and good luck.